And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. He is Aaron McIntyre. He's Todd Erzin. We're brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. You know, it's not just about length of life. It's about quality of life as well. You want to see if you can live pain-free as long as you possibly can. Now listen, but we get older. Our joints don't de-age like CGI. They get older too. These mortal coils, they do expire. But there is a reasonable chance that we have the drug-free supplement solution for your chronic pain. That's the pain that comes from too much inflammation in your joints that leads to that achiness, soreness, stiffness, etc., that just lingers and won't let go. And yeah, you could take drugs if you want, and they can work for sure. But they can maybe just mask pain, not actually get rid of it. May also come with some side effects as well. So what if we got rid of all that and got rid of what actually was causing the pain itself? Now, no guarantee, but over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor, and they saw such great results, 70% of them did anyway, that they stuck with the product long term. The drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. If you want to see, if you don't see a difference in your pain in just 3 weeks or less, it's going to cost you just $20 to find out. Go to relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. You can also call them at the number 800, the number 4RELIEF. That's 800, the number 4RELIEF, or visit relieffactor.com. All right, coming up on today's show, we have not done one of these in a few weeks. In fact, it's been so long since we've done one of these that I actually forgot in my initial rundown that we do this on a regular basis. So forgive me for that. We are going to return to Ask Me Anything this week. Todd, I am hoping for, given how it's been, I think, 2 or 3 weeks since we've done an AMA. So, I mean, there should be some pent-up anger, some pent-up frustration, some pent-up snottiness. I am expecting these questions to deliver. I'm expecting Kobayashi Maru level dilemmas. I am expecting a high level of snottiness, maybe even a question that ends with a yo mama. And this better not disappoint next hour.
There's some snottiness. I'll just leave it at that. There's some snottiness.
There is some snottiness next hour. Okay.
Doesn't mean that you got to hear the snottiness before you decide if it pays off.
Did you move the snotty questions to the front of the line at least?
Actually, I did.
You did. Okay, that's good. Because I want to make sure we get to the snotty ones first. Okay. Bob Vander Plaats is going to join us at the bottom of the hour. Now, I don't know yet what is in Aaron's montage, but we'll find out here in just a second.
Maybe.
But I think I am fully now. You contemplate something contrarian and countercultural, and your first thought is, all right, I'm just saying this because I'm really ticked off at the conventional wisdom. Doesn't mean we should just go in the complete opposite direction, right? Okay. Then you realize, well, wait a minute, I could actually further this point in order to make my broader point of why I am ticked off. That it still may not necessarily be the righteous course of action, but as the late great Rush Limbaugh used to put it, the illustrating of absurdity to be absurd by being absurd, right? Okay. But the fact that I could cogently make said contrarian point as an anathema to the conventional wisdom being shoved down our throats indicates just how much of a fallacy, how much BS is in that conventional wisdom. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Like, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for this, but I'm going to, in a just moral world, okay? But then you realize maybe we don't have one of those, okay? But I wouldn't, in an ideal situation, I would not objectively advocate for this position. But now it's of use to me to point out how specious and fallacious the conventional wisdom that we are being inundated with and shoved down our throats by really is. See what I'm saying? It's a deconstructing device.
I know what you're talking about, and that's the key point. We are expected to digest these absurdities in the name. This is just how the way things are done.
Non-skeptically, yes, and just open it up and just mainline the exhaust from the tailpipe with the banana inserted, right? Mainline it right into your pulmonary system. Yes, all the way. Choke on it and do not ask any questions lest you hate grandmothers and children of all persuasions.
Yes, and what you did over the weekend, you expressly told Todd and I to not let you do, but you did it anyway.
Yes, correct. All right. I dig it. To be clear, I think that I am now actually getting to the point that I might become this is not just an argumentative device. The more I am toying with this and contemplating it and looking at it from multiple sides, I actually think I'm starting to think that we should do this. What I'm going to advocate here soon.
The audience right now is just like, say it, Sam Kinison style.
The more I started just letting it percolate. How am I doing stalling for time here, Aaron? Is it working?
You're doing great. It's taking about 20 seconds to render every second of the Marxist Madness update.
Okay. The more I looked at this, though, I'm like, you know what? This is starting to make some sense. And the last, of course, it's 6 minutes after the hour. Still haven't told the audience what it is. Okay. But this is great broadcasting.
And we are ready.
Okay. So now you may find out what it is with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Boasberg once again. Judge James Boasberg, playing God King Potentate and President all at once, issued an extension to his attempt to block the Trump administration's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act as a means to deport violent Venezuelan criminals. Boasberg says his edict now applies until April 12th. Trump on Truth Social said yesterday in part, quote, if it was up to District Judge Boasberg and other radical left judges, nobody would be removed, the president wouldn't be allowed to do his job, and people's lives would be devastated all throughout our country. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller posted of these rogue judges, quote, that is not democracy, that is tyranny. In other news, Wisconsin has a big state Supreme Court election coming up tomorrow. The winner will enjoy a 10-year term in the pivotal battleground state's highest court. And last night in Green Bay, Elon Musk and his America PAC held a rally in support of Trump-endorsed Brad Schimmel, who's taking on the leftist candidate Susan Crawford.
It's sort of the poly market or Kalshi, like the betting markets. It varies between 85% and 90% probability of loss for Justice Schimmel. That's the current situation. So we got to pull a rabbit out of the hat next level. That's basically what's needed. We need to generate an anomaly in the matrix, and because I think there's currently. The Dems are 100,000 votes ahead.
Back in Washington, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, head of that committee overseeing the release of files for various high-level investigations like the JFK assassination, tossed this bombshell out there that got very little attention.
I would like to actually tell the American people it was made aware to me this evening that NBC actually has a video that's never been seen before. We're actually going to be sending a letter requesting that from NBC because it allegedly shows Oswald near the vehicle when the assassination took place, which means that he couldn't have been the shooter.
Another aviation near miss, a Delta Airlines Airbus A319 taking off from Reagan National Airport and a U.S. Air Force T-38 jet sounded alarms in the cockpit of the passenger plane on Friday. Delta 2983 was departing Reagan National around 3:15 p.m. in the afternoon and heading to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport for a regularly scheduled flight. An Air Force T-38 jet flying past the Delta plane and DCA Airport, going more than 350 miles an hour at 800 feet, caused those alarms to sound. The military jet took off and landed at Langley Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia. The FAA says they're investigating. International news, French far-right figurehead Marine Le Pen has been banned from running for political office for 5 years after being found guilty of embezzling European Union funds. How convenient for the regime. Just at the moment, it looked like the right wing in France was gaining steam. And now this. This is a thread from philosopher and intellectual Rod Martin about a new measure in China that formally allows its government to steal any and all intellectual property. Forgive all the emojis. I promise this guy is really smart. Martin says, quote, the CCP just showed their true colors. New anti-sanctions regulations are a license to steal from foreign companies, not even trying to hide it anymore. Your patents, your trademarks, your tech, all fair game for the Chinese Communist Party now. Think Microsoft, Windows, Apple, Tesla, any company doing business in China, their intellectual property could be seized overnight. No warning, no appeal, just poof. Rod Martin says he's been saying for months China can't afford a trade war. Now they're literally shooting themselves in the foot with the bazooka, he says. Only the U.S. has real sanctioning power globally. The European Union, they're weak. China knows this, and they're terrified of U.S. sanctions, but they're never going to let you know about it. Remember that Missouri lawsuit over COVID, Martin says? The state won $24 billion in damages. Now they're seizing farmland owned by China. So this is China's temper tantrum in response, but they've just made things 100 times worse. Foreign companies are already fleeing, Martin says. These new rules, they just turn that exodus into a stampede. The math is simple. Stay in China, risk everything, leave China, and survive. Guess which option many of these companies are choosing. The irony, these laws were meant to protect China against sanctions. Instead, they've given every foreign company the final push they needed to get out. The bottom line is this: China just proved exactly why we can't trust them with the global supply chain, much less our critical pharma manufacturing. They might do anything at any time, including steal everything we know. Again, that thread courtesy of Rod Martin. And finally, a Marxist Madness update. The elitist 8 is set, and in the tolerance region, for Hamas and Dick were always on a collision course as the #1 overall seed. For Hamas, easily swept by the 5 seed Shoot'em, as did the 2 seed Dick Levine, cruising to an easy victory against Don't Tell, Don't Tell. Moving on to the diversity region, the 8 seed Rights Come From Where continues its improbable run. They defeated the 5 seed Governor Weirdmer 60-40. Rights Come From Where will be taking on the 2 seed Mobile Abortions, who had no trouble with Whoops Pedophilia 70-30. In the equity region, another 1 seed goes down as Garbage was throttled by the upset-minded 4 seed We Demand Aid. We Demand Aid will be up against the 7 seed National Cathedral Witch, which barely survived the closest battle yet in Marxist Madness. Just 2 or 3 votes separated National Cathedral Witch in her victory against high-tech human trafficking. Finally, in the inclusion region, the 1 seed Gynocracy survived against Roots Part 2, 55-45. Gynocracy will be up against the 3 seed Transuterus, which beat Haiti over Sun in another very close battle, 51-49. The elitist 8 is set. Vote for who you want to continue on into the Fatal 4. Look for that voting thread later this afternoon at Steve Deace Show on X. And that's what happened while we were away.
So some years in the NCAA tournament, it kind of feels like an Elite 8 matchup might have been a de facto national championship game, right? Like there was a year that Michigan State with Magic Johnson won it all, and Indiana State was great that year with Larry Bird, but Notre Dame had a phenomenal team, Kelly Tripucka, Bill Lambier, and they played Michigan State in a regional final, and a lot of people at that time thought that might have been a de facto national championship game. There was a game here, the Marcus Pfizer Iowa State team, again invoking Michigan State. They played the Big Ten and Big 12 champions played each other in that regional final, and a lot of people thought that year that was essentially the national championship game. Is it possible for Hamas and Dick Levine in that Elite 8 is the national championship game?
Yes.
Yeah. It's possible, but this bracket is Marxist Madness personified. I mean, there's plucky gamers
we've got an
everywhere.
8, we've got a 7, yeah.
Unlike the March Madness, which, is just chalk for reasons, this one is just like...
Well, you've got egalitarianism, so there is no NIL here for the wrong reasons. So the misery is equally spread out here. So you have a balanced field here, not because of competitive balance, but because of egalitarian command. Right?
That's the first thing I thought when Aaron showed me. You didn't see it beforehand, but he asked my opinion on some things, and I said there are going to be some 8s and 7s that are around for a while.
And Rights Come From Where, as we've been pointing out since Selection Monday 3 weeks ago, that is uniquely positioned for this audience, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if some other people did a bracket similar to this, that would even make their bracket at all, okay? But for our audience, we are primarily a worldview show, for our audience, that just hits that sweet spot, man.
You must feel like a proud father.
I do.
Like nurturing that one, because I remember.
I do. And the fact that a witch, a witch at the National Cathedral, and that our rights don't come from God are the shocking Cinderellas in the Elite Eight restores some of my faith and hope in where we currently are as a civilization. Yes.
But we were friends. But when I was listening to the show, and when you started doing local WHO interviews with candidates, and when you first unveiled this hermeneutic, you just started asking them, where do rights come from, to Republicans, and they were glitching in real time.
Yes.
And people were taking notes, they were learning, and now they're discerning enough to make sure that they understand that they recognize excellence. I mean, your children are all grown up now, Steve. Well done.
So I think now it is time, and well done to the audience. It's time now to say what the it is I was teasing at the top while we were waiting for Aaron's montage to render so we could play it. All right. This evolution in my thinking began on Friday night, or Friday afternoon, when the story came out that Zelensky said, hey, we don't view all the previous aid we've received from the United States as some kind of loan we have to repay back. And my initial, I've detested this clown from the very beginning. I don't need any more reasons. I'm out of them. Okay. And I'm a firm believer that the only difference between Zelensky and Putin is the size of their militaries. Just switch armies. Okay. Put one guy in Kiev and the other in Moscow. And the only difference is one guy is belly dancing in his spare time. The other guy's doing, riding horses. At heart, they're the same dude. They just have different armies at their disposal. And I'm like, this clown, cut it off, end it. Who gives a rip? So that was stage one. All right. I'm fed up with the conventional wisdom. And so I'm willing to entertain the concept of just a complete and total eject. Right? That's stage one of the evolutionary process, Smalley, that I just described at the top of the show, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just complete, palpable, fed up. I've had it up to where with this clown. Has to end. I don't care what secondary considerations there are, what consequences are at stake. This is just a tumor that has to be removed. Cut it off. End this. Total grift anyway. That was stage one. Stage two is I read Rod Martin's thread that I sent over to you guys over the weekend. That was stage two. Okay? That was stage two. And I'm like, well, China's essentially just saying out loud, we're just gonna do in the open what we've been denying we've been doing for 30 years. We're just gonna do it now out in the open. Your intellectual property is not yours. We're just in exchange for all the cheap labor that we can command to work for subsistence wages in our command economy. We are, essentially monitoring, spying on you. We are stealing from you. That's the exchange rate for the cheap labor of endless mass of people that we can provide. Now we're just going to just out in the open flaunt it. We're not even hiding it now. We're not even winking, nodding now. We're not even taking you out to a very nice dinner in Beijing, okay, or Shanghai while your files are being downloaded and mainlined here into corporate company headquarters. We are actually just going to go ahead and just bring our people in and do that while you're actually doing the work. Just right out in the open. And thank you. Except we won't. And so that was stage two, where maybe I sense an opportunity to make an argument here. Okay? And so I posted in response to Rod Martin's thread over the weekend. You know what? At this point, just tell Putin he can have Ukraine. He can have it. Just tell him he can have it. In exchange for you forge a strategic alliance with the United States instead. We reverse Nixon's triangulation strategy from the 70s, where Nixon opened up economic empowerment to China through the United States as a way to isolate the Soviet Union. We reverse it now. Now we open up economic empowerment to Russia in order to isolate China. In exchange for coming along with us, you can have Ukraine. We don't care. Well, I don't care. And it was my idea. Okay. So you can have Ukraine. Don't care anyway. Have your playground. but you detach from China and join with the United States. And I ended it with, come at me. And I saw there weren't actually that many attempts to disabuse me of my notion. And the ones that I saw were, it's 1984 perpetually, basically. Okay. But the Soviet Union, okay, kind of stuff. And I was actually kind of prepared to let this go at that point. Thought my point was made, my frustration, not close to satiated, but at least acknowledged. All right.
Was step 4 playing either Risk or Stratego to kind of let this energy get out there?
Step 3 happened this morning when I log on first thing this morning and I see what has happened to Marine Le Pen in France. Where they have essentially used lawfare to guarantee that they don't have to run against her for political office.
Where did they learn that?
I can't even imagine. So now we're going to have our government do the same thing to its political opposition, and then when that doesn't work, just try killing them. Now this is going to be emulated across the secret democracies. But what about the secret democracies?
Coexist, Steve!
What about the secret democracies? And I'm now at that third stage I teased about 15 minutes ago, okay? The more I play around with this, I don't know what you all think, but I kind of think St. Petersburg Accords has a nice ring to it. Because you know what? I'm only suggesting now exactly what the Trump administration has already done on another front. Why were they so successful in the Middle East when previous administrations weren't? Previous administrations, R&D, were either unwilling or unable to detach the so-called Palestinian question. Remember, we talked about this during Trump's first term. They were unable or unwilling to detach the so-called Palestinian question from conversations about broader peace in the region. Trump did. Beginning with a speech in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in May of 2017, where we got a new plan. Here's the new plan. Leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. Want to make money with us, we'll make money for you. Get in our way, you're gonna wish that your father wore a prophylactic that night. Any questions? Are we good? Have a nice life, ham, salami, and bacon, and we'll see you later. Worked out great. In fact, the only thing that went well Trump's final year in office is when they formalized all the opening of these relationships with the Abraham Accords. And at the end of his term, remember, the Saudi government was having formal conversations with the Prime Minister of Israel for the first time ever. Worked out great. Because here's the reality that you're not told very often except on shows like this. There's no such thing as a Palestinian people, and the Arab world doesn't care about the Palestinian question either. They don't want those people in their country either. And they don't like Iran either. It's not as homogeneous as what we are sold. No. Just like there are sects and tribes and denominations of Christianity, no human enterprise is that homogeneous. Human nature is more complicated than that. Trump, the consummate salesman, realized that. So he offered a very cut and dry deal that cuts across all those things. And look what happened. Unprecedented success in the region. Why not just do the exact same thing here? You know who also doesn't want China probably stealing his intellectual property? Putin would be my guess. Why not just say to Putin, detach from China, isolate them further. You have more in common with us anyway. Because here's where we are. If moral high ground is not achievable, and since the third chapter of Genesis, I don't know how much you guys have read up recently on human nature and history, but it's actually more rare when moral high ground is achievable for the last 7,000 years than when it is not. That tends to be, the default tends to be, and in those days Israel had no king, so everyone did what was wise in their own eyes. That tends to be the default, guys. We're 7,000 years into this thing called human civilization, and we're not yet 250 years old. We're the longest concurrent experiment in self-governing freedom in the history of our species. That kind of gives you any window into the soul here. There is no higher moral ground here. Explain to me, other than lack of melanin in our skin, explain to me what I have in common, and what any of you that tune into any shows like this have in common with the government in France, the government in Germany, the government in the UK, for goodness sakes. You have a common language with them, at least. That's one more thing than you have with those other countries. Other than that, we're just white. We have nothing else in common with these people. Nothing. Remember Sweden, the socialist paradise we were supposed to emulate most of our lives? And then when it chose to actually follow science during COVID, the same people that said we got to be more like Sweden suddenly wrecked them barely. No, I don't know where Sweden's at on the map. What's Sweden? What is the place? What do we have in common? So if we're gonna, if I'm being told I've got to align and subsidize with people who are already engaged in Putin-esque tactics, you know who also is in favor of assassinating his political opposition and using lawfare to get rid of him and any other means he can? Putin is. So if there's no moral high ground here, if there's none, and there isn't, then at that point, you just make especially when you're the one with the leverage, you're swinging the biggest stick, you make the most cutthroat deals you can to your benefit. And you just go to Putin and say, aren't you tired of being China's JV team? Didn't it make you sick to grovel to them about could you continue on in Ukraine or not? We're just going to give it to you. We're just going to give it to you. You can have it. If you come with us. Detach from them. Like detach the Arab countries from the so-called Palestinian question and isolate Iran. Because Iran was using that as a wedge to keep itself ingratiated by funding terrorist cells in that country, to keep itself ingratiated into a broader Muslim world that doesn't like it either. So we're going to detach. Hey, if there was no Palestinian question, let's be honest, Trump said, you'd hate Iran every bit as much as we do. And you know what the Saudis said? You're right. You know what the Jordanians said? You're right. You know what the Egyptians said? You're right. Same thing here. Be honest. If Ukraine was off the table, Vlad, would you rather do business with me or Xi? Just if Ukraine was off the table, what do you think Vlad's answer probably is?
I think it's along where you're tracking.
I think he'd probably said, rather do business with you, Mr. President. Then let's just take Ukraine off the table. I think 30 years of trying to install a two-state solution that led to nothing but October 7th, I think we gave enough to that cause. Fair?
Fair.
Fair.
For sure.
I think we've given enough to the Ukraine cause, too. Anybody want to argue with me on that?
The reverse Wakanda, absolutely.
I think we've done enough. I think we've done enough. We tried the altruistic view. It did not work. So let's try the cutthroat one. Just take the Palestinian question off the table there. Omar in Mecca. Who would you rather do business with, us or Tehran? Answer us. Go to Vlad. Ask him the same question. Who would you rather do business with, us? Business with us or Xi? He's going to say us. Then make it so. Let's go ahead. Let's just make the most cutthroat deals we can, diminish the possibility of World War III whatsoever. Not to mention, I'm all in favor of doing more to triangulate and isolate Brussels and Davos. Anybody want to argue with me on that? See, the more I game plan and game theory this out, the more I'm actually now growing to be affirmatively in favor of this. Because I can't find any arguments against it that don't involve some kind of shared traditions between 1945 and 85 that are not relevant now. They're not relevant now. Tell me the Prime Minister of the UK, if he had Putin's power, would not do everything Putin has done. Can you look me in the eye and tell me this? No, you can't. Tell me Macron, if he had all the power Putin has, would not do the things Putin has done. Tell me he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. You can't tell me that. So if that's the case, then make a deal when you can make a deal with the guy who's got weapons that actually threaten you when the rest of these countries don't. And in fact, you're subsidizing them. You're subsidizing them. So what began as a lament, an event, and continued into an opportunity to make, I thought, a clever argument, I'm actually becoming a fairly vocal proponent of. Anybody want to talk me off the ledge here?
No, because I firmly believe a lot of these one-worlders are all making Russia this giant enemy because they are, in fact, cohabitating with China, the ones who are really the evil ones who poison the entire world. So, yeah, I think this is all a bunch of nonsense that needs to be exposed to, so you're tracking.
More in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we've done a lot of bragging over the last few years about how much our home state of Iowa has gone red and really led the fight on a lot of these culture war issues over the last few years, including earlier this year, we became the first state in the country to take all the gender insanity stuff completely out of its code, out of its civil rights language, just completely plucked it out and threw it into the ash heap of history where it belongs, if not a toilet. All right. So our state now is kind of at a vortex of now the next iteration of the right. And there's a playbook of the right that kind of predates the last decade that essentially says, we have to kind of do whatever the corporations want in exchange for permission, basically, to have the conservative cultural issues that we want to have. And what we've seen in that agreement, by the way, worked for a generation, because almost all of the rot gut in the culture that we were fighting on the social conservative side was coming from the public sector, the schools, the universities, government promotion, coercion, etc. But what's happened in the last decade or so is there's been a massive political realignment in America, but it's been in the boardrooms of America. And if in the 90s and 2000s, corporations essentially were neutral on these kinds of issues, gave to groups like the Family Leader and then groups that are also for gay marriage in order to say, hey, we're not in your fight. We love everybody, whatever side you're on, we want your business, etc. They have now, by and large, corporate America has taken a side here and is now every bit the benefactor of the Mishhavishim of woke cultural rot gut as government is. And so we're now seeing this paradigm shift take place on the right as well, where a new generation is coming forth and saying, hey, before we do any more public-private partnerships, before we offer any incentives, and hey, we love jobs and economic development too, but at what cost? Right? If a company was going to come into your state and say, hey, we want to come into your state, but you have to let us, just take all of our waste and just dump it right, into the local sewer system where your kids drink the water, we'd say no. Well, what about cultural pollution? And so this has created some interesting conversations over the last couple of weeks, because one of these bills is being hotly debated in our state right now. Bob Vander Plaats, good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing really well.
And as far as I know, I think this might be the first time your organization has taken a position on an issue that I think most people view it as outside of your lane, an economic development issue. But given the changes on the ground in the culture that I just described, where if we're now going to trace the source of where a lot of these pathologies and ideologies we're fighting in the culture are being supported and promoted from, it's coming sadly from the private sector. And so therefore, we want to conserve resources in a state, right? The most precious resource we have is our own families, right? Okay. Yeah. So families need jobs. We all agree to that too, right? Okay. So what's the economic, what kind of, mammon ratio are we going for here in exchange for Sodom and Gomorrah, basically?
So basically, Steve, what they're doing is they're making us play. We used to say, you will be made to care. Now they're kind of making us play. They're forcing our hand to play. And although our mission is that if it's for the family, we will be for it. If it's against the family, we're going to be against it. And whether that's economic policy or social policy or international policy, whatever the policy might be, if it benefits the family, we're going to be for it. And Steve, you're right to say, under Governor Reynolds' leadership and with this legislature, it's been pinch yourself stuff that we have taken a lot of ground under her leadership. You talk about the heartbeat bill. You talk about the school choice bill, the religious liberty bill, removing this gender nonsense out of the Iowa code, banning surgeries for minors. You can't mutilate the kids here in Iowa. All the stuff we applaud. Matter of fact, Steve, I could probably take the rest of the show here today to just applaud Governor Reynolds and her leadership and this legislator's leadership. And the Iowa electorate, they have rewarded them with landslide victories. Remember the red wave that was supposed to happen in 2022? And there's really only a couple of states where it happened, Florida and Iowa. Mm-hmm. We experienced a red wave. Iowans have rewarded that type of leadership. Well, now there's a bill it's a companion bill, so it's in the Senate and in the House, but basically granting ROFR status, which is right of first refusal status, to a couple of electrical companies for our electrical needs here in the state of Iowa. And so, because I used to teach economics, I'm always concerned about ROFR anyhow, because it eliminates competition. But we said, okay, reasonable minds can disagree what's in the best economic interest for the state of Iowa. However, when you take a deeper dive into the companies that you are granting special interest to, special status to, giving them this privilege, and all of a sudden they're the ones who are championing drag queen story hours for the kids, mm-hmm. or face painting, for what they call it, face painting to celebrate queer happiness with the kids. Well, to me, it's a little bit like the book of Ezekiel. If you know this is happening, if you say nothing, it's on your hands.
The watchman on the wall, yeah.
But if you know it and you at least alert them, mm-hmm. and that's what we're doing is for the family. That's why we decided to engage in this fight, is to alert Governor Reynolds, to alert the Iowa legislature. Hey, listen what you're doing. If you're going to go with this ROFR deal, these two companies, they're out loud and proud and they're doing everything DEI, ESG, woke, everything, which is a cultural decay to our society here in the state of Iowa. So we're taking a stand against it. And this is one of the very few times, probably the only time, where Governor Reynolds and I have been on the opposite side. And it's not the opposite. I don't say her and I are not against each other. These companies are forcing our hand here. Because I can see from her perch as governor why she may want to do this, because it's in the best economic interest in the state of Iowa. But I believe also from our perch, we have a responsibility to call this out. And so we're calling it out.
Is it possible in individual states, amendments, riders could be put on bills, some form of yearly accountability subcommittees that these corporations have to, come before and have their policies and practices vetted, by the duly elected legislature on behalf of the people? Hey, are you promoting this rot gut? Are you funding these kinds of things? That it can. Is there a way to do some of that so we don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Well,
there definitely is. As a matter of fact, we do have that when it comes to abortion already. That there's an amendment that says but these funds will go to women's health and all things women's health services, but not to abortion providers. Mm-hmm. You could have a pro-family amendment that would pass, I'll say, the DEI muster, all whatever muster you say, I want to make sure we protect our kids against this stuff. Mm-hmm. You could have a pro-family amendment that would get placed on that. That was going to take smarter people to craft than me, mm-hmm. but there is a way to do that, to offer an amendment like that.
What's fascinating about this, too, is I mentioned at the top, and we've talked about this before, and that states like Iowa have led the way on a lot of these fights. In this case, D.C. is actually leading the way.
Yeah.
This is a case where President Trump and his administration have, from day one, been aggressive against this. Yeah. Several major corporations, even before he got elected, took them seriously and started abandoning their own woke ideologies, departments, and things of that nature.
And frankly, Steve, I think what it is, there's a lot of corporations in America today. They don't want to be involved in this stuff. They want a way out. Trump gives them cover, we get out. Here's the thing. If you're up for a ROFR agreement in the state of Iowa, especially one that's going to be worth $1 billion or more dollars, I would think Iowa's got a strong hand here to say, how do you play with us?
Right. We're the ones giving you the resources. And by the way, this conversation could be applied in every single red state in America.
Oh, exactly.
If you don't need the resources, why are you coming to us for them in the first place, right?
And what Trump just showed, this would be a number 2 that I wanted to talk to you about, in a red state, even in a blue state. The state of Maine, where he's at odds with the governor in Maine on the safe girls sports, a new poll shows 64% of the people in Maine side with the president. The people, I mean, I don't care if you're red or blue state, they're tired of this type of garbage taking place.
Speaking of confronting blue states, Aaron, you throw that graphic up for just a second. This is a note Secretary of Education Linda McMahon has sent to the state of California. If you're listening on podcast, I'll read it for you. Ultimately, this comes down to, this is the conclusion of the note. Ultimately, this comes down to parents' fundamental rights to raise their own children. When we entrust our children to a school, we want to know that the school is committed to educating them on critical subjects, not exposing them to books and classroom discussions that suggest they can choose or change their sex. It isn't prejudicial or bigoted to expect teachers to acknowledge the reality of sex and help youngsters understand that no one is born in the wrong body.
Amen.
As Secretary of Education, I am officially asking you to inform this department whether you will remind schools in California to comply with federal law by protecting sex-separated spaces and activities. I am also officially asking you to publicly assure parents that California teachers will not facilitate the fantasy of gender transitions for their children. By doing so, you can ensure that schools will not continue to harm students by facilitating the false beliefs that sex is mutable and dependent on inner feelings or stereotypes. California's education system should not be a vehicle for extreme ideologies, but should refocus on its educational mission. I thank you for your kind attention in the matter. I will await your prompt response regarding your intention to address it. And again, that is the conclusion of a letter just sent by Secretary of Education Linda McMahon to the state of California.
You know, as a former educator, when I saw that Trump nominated Linda McMahon to be Secretary of Education, I really didn't know what to think. You know, does she have all I knew is that if her task was to eliminate the Department of Education at the federal level, I was all in favor of it. But when I read that note that she sent to Governor Newsom, that's a note the family leader could have wrote. That's basically Deuteronomy 6 stuff. The parents raise the children. The government doesn't raise the children. We expect you to be excellent in teaching our kids the academics. This is a lot of the teachers that I don't care where you go in the state of Iowa or across the country, a lot of the teachers saying, just let me teach. I'm sick of all this other garbage you're making me do. And she's basically saying that to Governor Newsom, saying, a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl. Stop this fantasy that they should be changing their sexes, that they're born in the wrong body. We should be applauding that type of leadership. But again, I think it shows the cultural narrative. And that's why when you take a look at Governor Reynolds and her exemplary leadership, the state of Iowa's legislature and their exemplary leadership on this issue, it would only follow suit that they follow through now on if they're going to do an economic package with a ROFR in it for companies to say, clean up your act, and then we can move this thing forward.
And I think that this is a conversation that every single state legislature ought to be having, particularly red ones. I think, you know, and these kinds of, maybe uncomfortable isn't the right word. How about disruptive? Because you are seeing some coalitions and relationships that have worked together very closely on several subjects now, having different takes and perspectives on this. I think that's indicative of whenever there is a generational paradigm shift.
Sure.
And if we were having this conversation in 1985, 1995, probably even 2005, I don't foresee an organization like yours would have a take on this. It's very clear that the major origin points, inflection points of the cultural pathologies and ideologies you're confronting are coming from the state, the universities, the government schools, for example, government incentive and coercion. But it's not 1985, 95, or 2005. And it's very clear in this era, okay, that at the very least, the private sector rivals the public for its promotion and subsidizing of these pathologies and ideologies, if not has taken the lead, or at the very least is even more influential because their trust, these brand names like John Deere with its DEI programs, John Deere's brand name is way more trusted than United States government. Okay. And so even if government is still by and large predisposed to give more money to these efforts, it doesn't have the credibility that these venerable American companies do. And so their ability to influence the cultural zeitgeist exceeds government in these cases. And so we're just going to have to wake up to this. And there is a ratio. There is an amount of money that is too much for your own soul. There just is. And I don't know necessarily what that amount is. I'm not God. It's not for me to determine that. I just think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and people need to come down and reason together about that.
And especially when your kids are in the vortex. And again, I taught economics. And in economics, when you studied the stock market, you were looking for companies that made money, that were profitable, that showed good business practices, they had a good product that would shape the vision of the new era of America, so to speak. But now there's a lot of these investment companies where their number one thing is not profit. It's social justice.
Exactly.
It's changing the way you operate as a culture.
Yep.
And that's why it behooves a state legislature and a governor and others in authority to make sure you put parameters, especially when you're granting special privilege or exclusivity.
Todd and Aaron, you have any thoughts on this?
I'm just gonna remind everybody of what I've said in the past. Economy. It's from the Greek economia, household. That's what this is about. And we need to make the family leader's message clear. We never, ever, ever sacrifice on that. Don't make the Scott Walker mistake. A guy who we thought had understood that, but it's clear he just liked a clean spreadsheet. When he went after the public sector unions, we thought he was making a broader moral statement. He wasn't. He forgot about where economia comes from. We will never, ever, ever sacrifice the household, because if we do, none of this is worth fighting for.
It's not 2005 anymore. Okay? the notion I'm fiscally conservative, socially liberal. No. These things are intrinsically connected. You cannot separate these notions. And so my fear here, it sounds like, my fear in going down roads like this is that we're kind of succumbing to that, it's really a hoax. You just cannot separate fiscal and social conservatism at all, whatever conservatism is anymore. You just cannot do that. And my fear is that maybe this is happening right now. So don't fall for that canard. We cannot do that. There is one way through, and that is the pursuit of truth. And I've seen these arguments so many times. It's 2025. The people, I think, by and large, have spoken. They are over the woke garbage in whatever form it comes, whether that's from your school or whether that's coming from a major corporation. They're over it. It would be a fool's errand to try to cozy up to corporations at this juncture.
And Steve, probably for me, and that's well said, both Todd and Aaron, but for me, this is a great opportunity to take a page out of Governor Ron DeSantis' playbook, taking on Disney. If you're going to have a special privilege here in the state of Florida, let's talk about what you're doing to the children. And to Aaron's point, you can't have a thriving economy as long as...
How's Florida's economy doing?
Very
Seems
well.
to be doing okay.
You can't have a thriving economy as long as you keep busting up the families and teaching rot gut to the kids. Those correlations will never work. It is a correlated matter. It always has been a correlated matter. We're just starting to wake up to it. And you have guys like President Trump, Vivek, Elon, Governor DeSantis, exposing all of this.
Well, appreciate your organization stepping forward. And like I said at the beginning, there's just got to be an amendment kind of accountability process that just applies standards to these kinds of things.
Sure, and it can be evergreen. Just apply it at free will.
We'll come back. It'll be your turn to ask me anything here next. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Steve@stevedeace.com is where you can go to email the program, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. We need all the help there we can get. At Deace Show on YouTube. Also, if you love the podcast version, in case you missed the news last week, for the time being, we have decided to move our show into the religion and spirituality category as the main category on iTunes. You're only allowed one main category at a time. iTunes right now is still the number one overall podcast platform, although I did some research over the weekend, and there's a lot of speculation out there that Spotify may end up passing iTunes soon, maybe as soon as later this year. We'll see. But anyway, it's still the number one way that you folks access our show is via iTunes. All right. And we are very, very concerned about the state of the church. We've been talking a lot already this year. The year's barely a third over. And how much time, guys, have we talked about MAGA being ahead of the church when it comes to issues of moral clarity?
Too many.
And that's just not a sustainable movement, right? So we're going to do our best to try to more directly see if we can get into like Ali Stuckey made a concerted effort a few years ago, taking a look at the state of suburban women and saying, hey, that's not the only people I want to talk to, obviously, but someone who's uniquely positioned has to go after that audience, right? And it's been, I think, a tremendous prophetic success for her. We want to do the same thing in terms of, can we help find, can some of these people that go to these soft-headed churches just click on us by accident? Not even realizing we're offering something they need that they don't even know that they need yet, kind of a thing, right? And man, when I looked over the weekend at the top 50 religion and spirituality podcast on iTunes, and I sent that list to you guys this weekend, our hunch about doing this to me was like confirmed. Let's just say, first and foremost, ain't a lot there for the men. All right. A lot of shows by women and for women were among the top 50 shows in that category. There were several I'd never even heard of. Maybe a dozen out of the 50 that I would have felt comfortable having my kids listen to, or I'd feel confident recommending to you guys in the audience, hey, if you want to get, more spiritual food, go here. It wasn't overall the most inspiring list. Fair?
Yeah.
Right? Am I being cruel?
No.
So I think that kind of confirmed our instincts to see if we can more purposefully penetrate this market. So you guys can help us by the more 5-star reviews you give us, the more subscribes or follows on iTunes you give us, the more it helps us to pop in that category. So please continue to do that. And thanks to all of you that have done that for us already as well. And this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at My Patriot Supply. You've seen it before when disasters strike. Grocery stores can empty overnight. It was about this time 5 years ago. We were all living through that could never happen here, and it was happening right here and everywhere. Right? The worst time to prepare for that could never happen here is right when that could never happen here is going down. So make sure you're prepared ahead of time. And our folks and friends at My Patriot Supply want to make sure that you are prepared for the very next crisis. Order their 4-week emergency food supply today, and you'll get 4 72-hour food kits completely free. That's almost 2 weeks of bonus meals at no cost. Each of these kits offer the full 2,000 plus calories per day that you need. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks included. Stays good for up to 25 years of proper storage as well. No last-minute panic worries for you. No empty shelves. No, you're covered. You have that peace of mind. Stock up today before this deal disappears. Go to preparewithdace.com to claim the deal, plus an extra 12 days of food for free at preparewithdace.com. That's preparewithdace.com. Or if you're watching today, you can scan the QR code right there on your screen if you want to do that. Or just go to preparewithdace.com. All right, with that, are we ready for some Ask Me Anything? We haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the people are ready.
All right. Aaron, you may fire away. Of course, I've not seen any of these questions. Todd, you curated and selected the ones that we're going to tackle for the rest of the hour. Let us begin.
We will begin with Kyle. Stop turning everything on your show into a religious parable. It's so annoying. Your show has about a good 20 minutes of opening content and is then annoying to listen to. Are you a pundit or a preacher? There's a period there. Your show used to be so good. So there's no question there, but I think the sentence, are you a pundit or a preacher, that should have a question mark, but it doesn't.
I mean, the answer is yes. What's funny is I get just as much commentary on feedback on the other side saying I've completely abandoned my faith. I belong in a cult. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're fine here. We're all fine here. How are you? We're doing great. Okay. And when you look at a lot of the interactions on social media, I think these questions came from our Facebook page, right? Mm-hmm. You can see, unfortunately, why some of those shows that you would not recommend to anyone are in the top 50 of that religion and spirituality category, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. Now, we're not in a good place right now as a people. That being said, to be fair to you, Kyle, in my own way, I feel the same tension that you do on a daily basis. And at different periods of time on this show, we have, I should say, I've exhibited both of those positions within different shows organically without even planning to. I will take on both of those vocations at different times in the exact same show. I saw this meme yesterday, and I shared it on Facebook and all my other social media pages. My politics 10 years ago was a Gadsden flag. Don't tread on me. Okay. My politics now, I cast thee out, Satan. Okay. And I thought that's pretty much it. When I started doing this in 2006, next year will be 20 years since I made the move from sports to news. This year is actually June 12th, or no, May 24th, I think it is. June 12th was the first time I did my news show of 2006. May 24th, 2000 is the first time I ever hosted my own radio show. So this is my 25th year in broadcasting. And until the last few years, I never envisioned the term demonic would be a regular part of the parlance of my analysis. But here we are. So Kyle, albeit from a different perspective, I feel the same tension as you. When I first got into this business, I really thought I was going to primarily be a pundit and an activist. I thought there really was a silent majority that the churches really were doing their job, but we just lacked, we were lions led by lambs on the Christian right, that we just lacked bold, principled leadership that would galvanize this army into a righteous vessel. And then I realized, oh no. Oh, that is still a problem, by the way. But we have an even more basic problem than that. The churches are, by and large, not doing their jobs. And I'm going to have to do way more theology, way more worldview formation than I ever thought I was going to have to do. So the answer to your question is yes. At any given time during a show, I will be both. Different eras of the show, we emphasize one more than the other. But if you don't want to hear about Jesus, this will not be the place for you. Whether your name is Kyle or anything else for that matter.
All right. Next up, we go to Michael Blotto, who says, why do you dismiss people's opinions based on the number of followers they have on a certain platform? I've heard a few times over the past few months that what do I care about so-and-so with 43 followers has to think? I mean,
to be fair, I dismiss people's opinions for a wide gamut of reasons. I mean, it's just a matter of, first of all, whether your opinion should be dismissed, and then I'll figure out after that what are the reasons why I choose to cite. But there's a wide gamut of reasons why I'll dismiss opinions. I've shared plenty of content from people with a small amount of followers as well. So don't feel bad that you have a small amount of followers. Feel bad that you had a really stupid opinion. Stupid enough to get dismissed. Feel bad about that.
All right, next we go to Christy Stevenson. Every time we find a church that seems to preach the right word, they also have merch, coffee shops, high-tech bands, and a focus on please serve and all the things. Is that ever okay? And if not, where do you start looking?
So Christy, I also appreciate the tension you feel. But Aaron, put her statement back up. Can you do that real quick? Sister, I would go to the very first thing you posted here. Every time we find a church that seems to preach the right word, full stop. If they are preaching the right word, then the rest of these extemporaneous issues at that point don't matter. This is why I'm not against large churches. Megachurch, to me, as I've said many times, megachurch is not a population. It's not a registry number. It's a culture. It's a corporatization of the church, with the intent of finding customers, not dispersing catechesis. With the intent of distributing a brand, not discipling a nation. In this case, if they've got the word of God right, then these other things are in the context of being of making the word of God more accessible in a modern age. I'm not against modernity. I'm online as a show. Our show is digital. Can't find it on a linear, well, you can, I guess Pluto, I forget about that, but you can't find it on a traditional terrestrial radio network anymore. I mean, why did we do that? Because nobody listens to terrestrial radio anymore, and everybody's online. So we acknowledged modernity. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging modernity or doing these things to grow the message. You can tell if they're growing a brand when you can't say the first part of your question. See what I'm saying? If you can't say the first part of your question, they're growing a brand. If you can say the first part of your question unironically and honestly, then they're growing a message. There's nothing wrong with growing a message. Billy Sunday went on radio because that's what most people were listening to in his time. Billy Graham went on television because that's where most people were at that time. A lot of these are ways that people get a message to and communicated to in the era now in which we live. You know what? They didn't bring chairs into the church like the 12th century or something, I believe it was. We also didn't put chapters in the Bible till like the 13th century, I think it was. Something like that. Well, I mean, why? Well, I mean, sitting became more of a custom. Made church less accessible, asking people to stand for an hour and a half concurrently. That's when the Catholics decided we got to stand, kneel. I made that part up. Then the chapters went into the Bible because books are becoming more available now. We're not just in the era where the monks are sitting in monasteries handwriting books and with incredible craftsmanship that took 5 years, to do one copy of. All right. Soon the printing press will come within 100 years or so of that. And now books are way more accessible. People are used to a certain kind of narrative absorption than just a long running narrative. So chapters came in order to accommodate the changes in attitudes and lifestyles without changing the word or the truth. Nothing wrong with that, provided we're not changing the word or the truth. So if you can say, we found a church preaching the right word, full stop, man. And thank Jesus that you found it. Because you guys know how much I love Jack Hibbs. The thing that will blow you away if you ever, and I don't, it ain't really a Protestant thing to encourage pilgrimages to particular holy sites. Okay. But if you're ever in the Orange County area, anywhere near Chino Hills, I would strongly urge you just to walk into Jack Hibbs' Calvary Chapel Church one Sunday and go to a service. Because when you're on that campus, it has all the trappings and accoutrements of modernity, of the modern American megachurch. As does the modern worship style. And then after the music, though, they do the announcements. And the announcements come on. And there's the typical, quote-unquote, megachurch announcements, right? Hey, we're taking the youth to the water park for July 4th or Memorial Day. Hey, we're, having a daddy-daughter dance. Okay, and extra points to dad if, he lets his daughters, dress him up, kind of stuff, okay? Which there's nothing inherently wrong with, unless it just stops there. Except the announcements at Jack's church don't stop there. After that comes, and now this week's legislative update. Here's where they're screwing you in Sacramento. Here are the names of the pagan legislators you need to call and confront, and we need to take out in the next election. No false choices. So, should we be like hardcore about moral clarity and the truth? Or really hardcore about doing whatever we can with whatever resources are at our disposal with reaching a lost world for the gospel? And at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, what do you think the answer to that dilemma is? Yes. Yes is the answer. Yes is the answer. And then Jack comes out and pulls no punches in his own very likable way. But no punches are pulled. It's why he's hosting Steve Deace and Charlie Kirk events at his church. They're not pulling punches there. So if the first part of and I say this not just to, and what's her name again? I'm sorry, Aaron?
Christy.
I don't just say this to Christy, everyone within the sound of my voice. If you can say they're preaching the right word, that's all that matters then. Full stop. We're good here. Everything else becomes a question of style, preference, and we make accommodations where those things are concerned. Be thankful you found someplace preaching the right word. And if they're preaching the right word, then those things are about spreading a message, not it growing a brand. You guys want to add anything to that before I move on?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
Different context. Man looks at outward appearance. God looks at the heart. What is the heart of the church that you're looking at? Try to deduce that first before anything else.
That's a great point. And the pulpit will reveal that.
Yes.
The pulpit, what's said or not even said, even more importantly, what's said, and even more importantly, what is not said from the pulpit. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and never more bluntly or lack thereof than from the pulpit.
Well said. Next up, we go to Timothy Noah Brown, who says AI is in nearly everything now. I feel AI will be the fulfillment of Revelation 13, 15, and 16. Do you think AI is purely a technological breakthrough, or could this be a tool of the demonic realm?
So for those of you that don't know what Revelation 13 is, you ever seen the Omen Part 2? The second Omen movie, where they send... now on the brink of puberty, Damien the Antichrist goes to military school, a very prestigious military academy, and the devil has placed one of his acolytes, as what happens in all the Damien movies, has placed one of his acolytes there as one of the commandants of the school to help shepherd young Damien to his ultimate destiny. And he starts realizing now that he's hitting puberty and he's becoming more self-aware. He's starting to realize there are things different about him. And there's a great scene where he's just being one of the best scenes in any horror film ever made, I think. And it's Damien's in class, and he's just being a goofball, like a typical 12, 13-year-old kid. And the teacher's trying to teach war history, and he's just being a goofball, not paying attention. And the teacher decides he's going to make a fool out of Damien in front of the class to teach him a lesson. And so he just starts asking Damien where, like, all these famous battles and wars and generals. You remember this scene? Have you ever seen the movie?
No.
Where all this kind of stuff takes place, and Damien just knows it all. Yeah. Knows it all. And ends up turning the tables on this professor and embarrassing him in front of the class. He knows it all. And he's like, how do I know this stuff, right? And so this commandant who's one of Satan's acolytes, his father's acolytes, says to him, go back to your room quietly, open up your Bible to Revelation 13 and read. All right, so Revelation 13 is about the beast, the Antichrist. Okay, we get into, a lot of what are typical tropes of, or truisms, depending on your perspective, of modern interpretation of end times events, mark of the beast, stuff of that nature. Okay, so this person is asking whether I think AI could be included in such a thing. The answer to me would be yes. I do think it would make such a fulfillment practically understandable. I'm using that language because I want to make sure we do not do eisegesis, or because something makes sense to us, it fulfills the Bible, right? Like, well, it doesn't make sense to me that the Israelites marched around Jericho and shouted loud enough for the walls to come down. Well, maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but God exists outside of our concepts of time and space. So you're trying to see a supernatural, transcendent being through your limited, finite, purely natural understanding. So you can't. And when you try, you make yourself out to essentially be God by limiting what you think could be true based on your own understanding, right? So I'm not saying because we can now see a path where that kind of eschatology could be fulfilled that we didn't see a few years ago, that means it's true. That eschatology is true whether or false, whether we see a path of achievability or not. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The scriptures speak to us. We don't speak to it. Want to make sure I'm very clear on that. That being said, however, if you were wondering what are, in the last few years, has it not, I just mentioned this during the promotion for My Patriot Supply. It was about 5 years ago at this time, we saw the entire world, without a shot fired, without a treaty signed, without an invasion launched, with very limited exceptions, we saw the entire world just immediately adopt, regardless of system of governments, philosophy of governance, customs, culture, language of the people. We saw pretty much the entire planet just adopt instantly an ideology and impose it on their people. So, one of the things dispensationalists often believe in is what is called progressive revelation, small p, all right? For my Reformed brethren, that don't want to pounce on the term progressive, it's a different kind of progressive, meaning that as history unfolds, God reveals more of the mystery of his plan. And they this is not something they've made up. Paul says this several times in his epistles. The mystery of salvation is now here. Okay, that things that were references in the Old Testament now we understand. In other words, we understand what they mean now that Christ has come and fulfilled these things and put them in their proper context. Okay? And so you can see now that the kinds of systems required for an instantaneous authoritarian government with a unified message that could suddenly appear on the scene and impose that on the people. That exists now in ways it did not in the 19th century and much of the 20th century. That doesn't mean, by the way, that eschatology could not have been fulfilled in the 19th or 20th century. It just means God would have had to create or generate and move pieces on a chessboard that we could not have foreseen living in that particular time period that we can now understand and see. You've heard me say in the past, when Paul says, when the time was right, God sent his son, what did that mean? A random moment? No. What it meant was, since Babel, this was the first time the world was united largely by one set of socioeconomic laws, standards, and language. Rome. And that Rome had even created some form of nascent security of passage in the open sea, mass transit, some proto-forms of paving roads. None of these things existed prior to Rome, or at least not since the antediluvian era, which we're just probably now learning about exactly what went on during this period of time. Ancient aliens thinks they're covering, doesn't realize what they're covering is just really the pre-Noahic flood era of human existence. So that's why the time was right. The conditions existed for the first time where you could practically take a message and get it out to the masses of people outside of a central authority structure. Similarly, there is now the ability for a central authority structure to suddenly emerge with a unified message that can be imposed and followed that did not practically exist before. Am I explaining this okay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so AI could absolutely be the next iteration of such a system in that it also provides explanations for people that enhance the likelihood of their compliance. Okay, that makes sense. Anybody want anything to that?
I'll just say I believe in this so much that AI has been one of my answers I've highlighted at the end of the year and our end of the year shows and predictions and person of the year, things like that. I've highlighted it the last 2 years. And more specifically, I just saw this weekend, Christians. We're talking about, we think about the Christians are asking this question. Is this the Antichrist? Is this what's going to seduce the world? Christians were hurling grok summaries about their own faith back and forth at each other like they were like magical incantations. So I absolutely believe that this is possible.
Next up, go to Jonathan Mole, who asks, as part of the 12-month celebration of America starting this summer, will there be a tour or exhibit of Steve's home and new WASP-free studio? If so, is Aaron the de facto tour guide, or do you have to pay extra for his one tour-a-day narration accompanied by a selection of smoked meats?
I think these are great ideas. I mean, I think these are great ideas.
I'm kind of thinking about just keeping an eye open for maybe a cheap used smoker on Facebook Marketplace, because the new place has a garage.
It does. Yeah.
We could do I mean, you said you wanted to be the Dan Patrick of like right-wing media or whatever, however you're characterized.
Meaning I could just roll in and have
Meet
just a hangout place
Friday.
to do the show from?
Yes.
Yeah.
Meet Friday.
Can we call it something else maybe?
That's what he calls it.
Also, I'm Catholic.
I kind of feel like we're just walking into something with that. You know what I'm saying? Can we call it something else? How about Carnivore Friday? Is that better?
Can you have salmon on Friday? Or is it just the McDonald's thing that you can eat on Friday?
You can have fish, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're just talking beef and poultry base and pork, right?
Yeah.
But fish is good?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that year round?
What? Yeah. Well, yes and no.
Okay. All right. Is it supposed to be year round? I don't know. I'm genuinely asking.
I'm not even sure what the gray area is in there, but it's
okay.
I mean, it used to be year round, and Friday is still supposed to be more penitential day than other days, but you can apply it in different ways than.
I mean, if we can get some of that red snapper from Miami up here that I had at a restaurant when I went to do to help the Team DeSantis with the Miami debate in the fall of 23. That fish was abso-freaking-lutely incredible. So we can get some of that shipped up here. We can do that, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but let's not do meat Friday. How about Carnivore Friday?
How about Meat Thursday?
How about not meat anything?
How about Meat Wednesday?
How about we just do carnivore instead? Because I want to make sure people understand we are just consuming a product here. And this is not a Lindsey Graham campaign event.
Sorry. I was homeschooled. I didn't pick up what you were putting down there.
Of course you didn't. Yes. Yeah. I know. Mr. Innocence there with your fags for Hamas bracket. Yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Way to leave me hanging out to dry. I respect that.
Yeah.
But we actually did just renovate the main level of our home. I don't think Amy would mind showing it off. It's very cute. I like it.
It's very what?
It's very cute.
That's it.
It's a cute little house we got.
What's the over-under on the amount of days when people coming to show up that you two went to crawl back
probably
into
zero.
your holes? Yeah,
probably zero. Well, maybe one. Maybe
it's
one
number.
Maybe one. Might last one day. Let's say we didn't kept our word. What's the amount of times Aaron answers the door, do you think? All right, we'll come back. It'll be your turn to ask me anything with more questions here in a moment. Stay tuned. Remember that thing we used to have called the real estate market? Yeah, kind of. Practices kind of were stable. Interest rates were kind of low, right? Yeah, we don't have that anymore. In fact, in these unprecedented times, we haven't even had a real estate market. I mean, we haven't had one in 5 years between COVID and then Let's Go Brandon. So we're trying to make the real estate market in America great again as well. I moved into a neighborhood where the first 15 years there, if you saw a for sale sign, it didn't last long. And the last 5 years in that neighborhood, you see a for sale sign, you're like, what are those? Okay, so if you're going back in to try to do your part to make the real estate market great again, make sure you've got an agent that you can trust that can help guide you through what is a way different process than it was even just 5 years ago. Where would you find that agent? The name says it all. Go to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. There you're going to find an agent whose track record of success we have confirmed. Otherwise, we wouldn't recommend them to you. And then, of course, you can get started with them, and a lot of times they're from right here in the same Blaze audience as you. All right, so whether it's across town, across the state, across the country, wherever you need to go, you have an agent that can get you to where you ultimately need to go, and that is to the finish line successfully. realestateagentsitrust.com is where you can go to find that. That person is right there waiting for you at realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, let's continue on with some Ask Me Anything, Aaron.
Going to Jason Sixsmith, who says, when Thomas Jefferson wrote of the inalienable right to the pursuit of happiness, what he had in mind was, I'm going to butcher this, eudaimonia, a life of virtue and excellence. Since we've reduced happiness to the pursuit of pleasure in our modern vernacular, would you, Todd, and Aaron be willing to steal the Declaration of Independence to update the language?
So someone should make a movie about that, right? Weren't those movies good, man?
Oh, yeah.
They were.
Yeah, they were fun.
They were a lot of fun. They were really good. That's a very important context that you're stating there. Okay? I mean, first of all, look at what we've done to the word virtue in our time. I mean, it meant for a millennia in Western tradition, virtue meant seeking a life or of some form of common good, self-betterment, transcendent morality. Depending on if you were primarily a Christian, you were primarily a creature of the Enlightenment, etc. Now, it is to demonstrate how self-righteously better I am than other people by my willingness to comply with literally every harebrained scheme there's no evidence provided me for that I wouldn't ask for even if there were. Because I just can't wait to show you how much of a dunce I am, how much of a plebe I am, how much of a lemming I can be. So you have a great point there about what the phrase pursuit of happiness meant. But we've even completely bastardized the terms like virtue that you're citing as part of its original context. I mean, we're in a post-truth culture. We're in a post-Christian culture. And the reality is you cannot have a sustainable framework of liberty and freedom without Christianity. You can't. Unless there is a critical mass of the people. Now, what's that critical mass? Is it a plurality? Is it a majority? Is it a significant faction? If so, how significant does the faction have to be? I don't know. I just know there has to be some form of critical mass of people who are indwelt with the Holy Spirit of God so that they will live a life of sensual limitation. That they will not view themselves as entitled to things that do not belong to them. They will see that they will recognize there is more to life than the ends of their fingers and toes. And they will put things in an eternal context and not a temporal or immediate gratification one. Without that, it's not possible, which is why at not even 250 years old, we're the longest concurrent experiment in this because we launched after there were great awakenings, after there were revivals. We came from a baker's dozen of colonies who were all founded from some vestige of Christianity. So the spiritual DNA was baked into the cake. It cannot be done. It cannot be done without Christ. There is no other successful force that both limits human depravity while incentivizing meritocracy and the potential for human excellence than Christianity. It doesn't exist. Other religions, when they take root and dominate a culture, they will be able to incentivize one or the other. Like in a Muslim-dominated country, there's a lot of moral denial in a Muslim-dominated country, right? Mm-hmm. Not a lot of meritocracy of excellence, however. You essentially get a form of a caste system, haves and have-nots. The only worldview ever created that has demonstrated it can simultaneously incentivize these things is the Christian worldview. That's because of the presence of the Holy Spirit indwelt in a critical mass of the citizenry, including the people in elected office, who will limit themselves as well. because the same force exists within them as within the people. And that's how you can have a government, by the consent of the governed, and you cannot have one without that. The absolute best you can do is a temporary venting of grievance. Vox populi, French Revolution. The problem is the people doing the revolting are every bit as sinners as the ones they're revolting against. So when they're done, they just put a whole different crop of people in prison. They end up doing many of the same practices that they overthrew. So the reign of aristocracy, we have a reign of terror. Same song, different lyrics. Christianity is the only force on earth capable of incentivizing merit and restraining human passions simultaneously. No other force exists. So without it, we can't have nice things. In fact, we can't have anything for an extended period of time. Nothing, in fact. Next question.
All right, we'll go to Dan Deace, who says, are there too many non-biblical things that Catholics do to take them seriously? I.e. elevate... God, you selected that question.
Yeah, I picked the question, so I know it's coming. Yeah.
I.e. elevating Mary, calling them all saints, elevating the Pope and traditions and council decisions to the equivalence of the Bible, the Eucharist, baby baptism, etc.
All right, leave that up there for just a second, if you don't mind. Okay.
This is an elaborate plot.
I would
to make us all look bad.
I would love, if you know anything about me, you know I love the smell of napalm in the morning because it smells like victory. Okay? I love to win. I love to be proven right. Love it. Okay? Here's the problem I have, though. That worldview I just cited a minute ago talked about how it restrains passions. Yeah. So one of the ways that it does that is with conviction. And there are several such examples of this conviction. Why do you call me Lord if you do not do what I say? I agree. There are no specific baptisms of babies in the Bible. I agree. I also, I've never, chapter and verse of the sinner's prayer. Do you guys know where that is? Where'd we get the sinner's prayer? Where'd we get that for our Protestant churches? That many of them, my own included, do some iteration of a call to salvation every week. What chapter and verse are we quoting? I mean, you may agree. You may say that when Catholics say Hail Mary, full of grace, and they claim they are quoting what the angel Gabriel says to Mary, and they are. You and I, as fellow Protestants, may agree that they're taking that out of context, but at least that's actually directly from the Bible. You know what? Also, you know what is not directly from the Bible. There is no sinner's prayer. No. We think there's justification for it because whoever calls in the name of the Lord shall be saved. So how do we know how to call on the name of the Lord when it doesn't specifically give us an idea of what exactly that entails? It doesn't give us like an incantation, right? Well, we have these things called churches and denominations, and they have these things called traditions where they do these things with altar calls and people of priestly authority in the pulpit that we think have a specific charge by the Holy Spirit in order to call sinners forth to salvation in a corporate setting known as a church. You know what that sounds an awful lot like? Yeah. See. A tradition believed to be authoritative because there's a priest that we believe has a unique calling authority. to issue such a decree and a call from the pulpit. That sounds familiar. All right, I'm trying to. Slips my mind here. Todd, familiar to you at all? Nothing? Doesn't ring a bell? No?
Few.
I'm kind of hanging out here on a string all by myself. My point being, if I thought the most precise maybe is the way, I will go. If I thought the most precise way to worship Christ was at Mass, I would go to church with Todd. I don't think that, so I don't. However, I also, am commanded to remove the beam from my own eye rather than the speck of dust of my brother's. I also have to reconcile in my own limited understanding as a community college graduate how great men and heroes of the faith that clearly have demonstrated fruit of being used by the kingdom of God for tremendous means of advancing it also had profound disagreements on many of the issues that you cited in your own challenge. And I don't know how to reconcile that. Maybe you do. If so, you are smarter and better at this than me. I believe in the Reformation. I don't think Western civilization would have survived without it. And there would have never been a country called the United States of America without it. That being said, we only had Western civilization to lament over it all because of the Catholic Church. So I have disagreements. I'm way more comfortable discussing those individual disagreements than some kind of corporate laying out of doctrine when I can't find a sect or tradition or denomination from the team whose jersey I wear that I can make a direct sola scriptura biblical parallel explanation for without taking some form of liberty with conscience and context and tradition. Thankfully, Christ gave us a standard by which we could referee these things. We could officiate these dilemmas. We could navigate them successfully. And that is to look at the fruit of one another. Because a bad tree cannot produce good fruit, and a good tree does not produce bad fruit. So, I have several disagreements with Todd, which he has with me. Nevertheless, he's on this show because the fruit of salvation is apparent in his life. And I think he would say he is willing to share this show with me for the same reason, despite those disagreements.
I just did during our last Romans discussion, in fact, yes.
There you go. Now, let me also say this plainly. That is not meant to trivialize these disagreements.
No.
What does happen this weekend, by the way, and this is just coincidentally, there's a bunch of anti-Catholic Protestants on X right now who actually took the side of the black mass Satanists in Kansas against the Catholics.
Is that because the guy was stopped by a Catholic parishioner? Is that why? Yeah,
and they said you're doing all of this over a stupid cracker. They honestly took the side of the black mass Satans.
I'm not aligned with that on any level whatsoever, just to make that very clear. So in fact, I would actually make the argument what you just described is what actually trivializes these arguments.
Preach.
That's what actually trivializes these debates. I mean, we used to mock the left. In fact, we're still mocking them. All right, burning electric cars now to own the cons, right? Okay, what they were willing to do in order to own Trump, the orange man, bad. All right, siding with Satanists to own the Catholics. I'm not there with you, man. You have lost the plot. If that was you, we good? We out of time? Final thoughts? We got about a minute here.
Yeah, all of these are just, they require more, like, I hate this word, nuance, so I don't think we can do anything rapid fire in the next minute.
Did you get your fill of snotty? There was some in there.
There was some, I even though I was...
You wanted more?
I did.
Oh, this one would be fast, actually. Let's go to Lynn. Do you think it's possible in the next 4 years or even the next 10 years that we could see unbiased news on the major networks?
Not without revival. We can't do it. We're not capable of fairness, objectivity in our own flesh. We can't do it. It's just
like you said, they're in the streets burning Teslas right now.
Yes,
yeah.
Any more than we can sprout wings and fly off of skyscrapers, or any more than we can breathe in the vastness of space that has no air without oxygen. We're not capable of it. We can't do it, and we never were.
Correct.
Okay, these things only. This is what moral. And when Adam said, what Todd cites all the time, what does moral and religious people mean? It means people indwelt with the Holy Spirit of God. That's what it means. And without a critical mass of that, now I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a plurality, a majority, a significant faction. I just know it's more people than we got. We can say that about right now. I know it's more than we have right now. How many more? I don't know. But without that, no, we're not capable of it as a species. We aren't. It's hard enough even when we have it, let alone without it. We're going to stick around and do overtime for subscribers. Hope you're one of them at blazetv.com/days. For the rest of you, see you tomorrow, Romans 8:28.